Happy Sunday, everybody, and welcome to another Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. Kevin, we are a ways away from basketball, but we are still getting news fast and furious in terms of this Arkansas men's hoops squad. We're going to open by talking a little bit of scheduling stuff. Arkansas put together some fun non-con matchups a season ago. You think Baylor, you think Michigan and New York City, and the reason I bring Michigan and New York City up is we're hearing Houston and New York City for the Hogs. A heck of a matchup for Arkansas, and one that I think fans should be really excited about. That'll be a marquee one for the entire sport, across the sport, along with what they've got going on with Duke and everything else in the non-con already.
Yeah, how about John Calipari, that kind of casual
Yeah,
talking to a
just
group of
drop it in.
fans
Yeah,
yesterday at his father-daughter camp, he just tells the group, "Hey, by the way, we're playing Houston in New York City." And once that got tweeted out, it just circulated. And
yeah.
I talked to an in-state high school head coach who was there with his daughter.
Mm.
And he said, "Yeah, it was." He goes, "I really wasn't fully familiar with every bit of little news about the schedule that was out." He goes, "I just assumed it was already known," and he was just reminding people they were playing Houston, New York City. He goes, "Then I realized after we left, and that was like how he broke it, you
Hmm.
know." So that was an interesting conversation. But look, you remember last year after Arkansas played Michigan in New York City, and they were, I guess the team was up there. I don't know if it was pregame lead up or right after it. Calipari says, "We want to do this again. We want to come
Yeah,
back next year." He
yeah.
said it then, and he's talked about it a little bit without naming an opponent. Now we know the opponent. Oh, by the way, a team that's been to multiple Final Fours in the
Yep.
last few years under Kelvin Sampson. Now, the title game last year and a whisker away from winning it all.
Yeah.
And we know you've got Duke and Chicago on Thanksgiving Day, a team that Houston beat in the Final Four.
Yeah.
I mean, Duke Houston looked dead to rights in that
Yeah.
final minute, right? Multiple possession lead, and Houston flips the script. I mean, it just shocked everybody. So you've got two teams on your schedule that were in last year's Final Four. One that played really close to winning it all in that championship game against Florida. Obviously, this is incredible scheduling by John Calipari. And the Baylor looks like Arkansas is going to
Hmm.
host Baylor, have a home game in state. We know they've got the ACC SEC challenge that should be back in Fayetteville. 2 years ago, it was Duke, a top 10 rated Duke team. Speaking of the Blue Devils, doubt we'll see them in the challenge since Arkansas is playing them on Thanksgiving Day. But look, Jacob, this is to me, this is the Calipari touch.
Hmm.
Arkansas is not just playing a national schedule in non-conference; they're playing heavy, heavy hitters. And when you think about Feast Week and Thanksgiving Day against Duke, we don't know a date yet for Houston and New York City, but a lot of times in non-conference play, November, December, we know it's holidays, and we know there's all of these various national, whether they're little tournaments or
Yeah.
showcase games, but there's a lot of big mega stage matchups. And these teams that Calipari signed up maybe makes Arkansas and whoever that opponent is the marquee matchup among other big stage games. So I put an emphasis on that because I think it's one thing to say, well, it's cool they're playing some really good teams and there are other high majors. You're measuring yourself. Some of this is away from home. Again, this year you'll have at least two at home. But it's not just that. I think it's like you may be the top billing on the marquee. That is John Calipari's style. He's just not going to have it any other way. We can debate this. Even other matchups, people say, "Oh, that's more intriguing to me." But it's hard to sneeze at some of these things. And Houston and New York City, thanks for the casual release at
Yeah.
father-daughter camp in Fayetteville yesterday, Cal. I guess that's another thing that makes it interesting and to talk about is how we found out.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll one up you further from the standpoint that you talked about. All right, you got Houston and Duke, two teams that met in the Final Four. Think about who was in the other Final Four matchup. It'd be Florida and Auburn, right? So you are now set to play all four Final Four teams from a season ago. Maybe a couple of them twice, depending on what we look at with Florida and Auburn being home and homes. We don't know the SEC slate yet, but it's exactly right. Cal loves to test his teams, and that's exactly what he's doing here. The casual nature of it just was hilarious. Like, you're just going to drop in that,
Yeah,
a team that's arguably been one of the, what would you say, three best programs in the country over the last 5 years, somewhere in
absolutely.
that range, right?
Yeah.
And you're just going to drop, yeah, New York City. I think we're going to match up with Houston. It's exciting. And the thing that you mentioned with Baylor is what gets me excited also from the standpoint that with the SEC ACC challenge coming back as well, if you had a gripe, if you were an Arkansas fan, it was look at the non-con schedule last year. It was so exciting. There was a lot of fun games. None of them were in front of fans outside of that preseason game, right? And
Yeah.
so it's exciting to me that potentially we could see a game in Fayetteville, a non-con game, one that gets the fans excited and gets a kind of Bud Walton at full throw, because that was an issue early on in the season last year.
Yeah, and you're definitely gonna get a high major when the
Yeah.
ACC SEC Challenge in Fayetteville, because it's the time for
Mhm.
that. But Baylor, uh, unless they are planning that for Little Rock, it sounds to me like it's probably a Fayetteville game.
Yeah.
But it's to get so you're gonna have two, and that's what it's not. It's kind of rare to have one of those, but to have two, and again, I go back to Calipari. It's just different. The recruiting's different. It's been
Yeah.
good at Arkansas. It's even better. These kind of things. I mean, again, you've got a decade-long plus Hall of Famer, Naismith Hall of Fame elected, inducted guy, and I always say the greatest recruiter of all time. And if there's a Mount Rushmore of the greatest college coaches ever, based on everything, he's got, you've got a credible case to make. He should be on it.
Yeah.
I mean, his name's being bantied about with the New York Knicks job. That's just the kind of credibility and cachet the guy carries. And so when you get these scheduling drops, it's exciting. It's not
Yeah.
just like, oh, that's good, but we're a ways away. No, it's something to get excited about, even when you're in the middle of the Diamond Hogs trying to get this super regional tucked away, finished away,
Yeah.
polished off, and move on to Omaha. This is still relevant even now when there's so much going on.
Yeah, yeah, and what it does is it makes basketball season feel closer. We've got tangible,
Yeah.
who Arkansas is going to play, who Arkansas is going to match up with. But man, that Arkansas Houston game is going to be a heck of a matchup, as are a couple of the other non-con matchups.
Yeah.
But we still aren't entirely sure on what this roster will look like. We're going to talk a little bit about that after a quick break. All right, back here on the Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. Kevin, we referenced it before the break. Even though the schedule not coming together, but we're getting pieces of it filtering in bit by bit, random schedule drops. Still unsure what the finalized roster is going to look like for Arkansas. The Hogs looking to add a international player, a front court player, trying to shore up. I don't know if you would call it a weakness, but the spot definitely, if you look at this roster, you're good in the back court. Maybe front court would be the place that Arkansas would go to get some help.
Yeah, I'm told that there's multiple international players that Arkansas has been looking at. The one that's got a lot of momentum right now, and I've got two sources that think he's going to end up being Arkansas bound.
Mm.
I've been doing my due diligence and checking on this, but Igor Rizhov, Egor, first name, last name, Ryzhov, 6'11" forward center out of Russia, St. Petersburg. Been playing on the Russian pro circuit, an upper division and a lower division, playing for both teams this past season. Still competing as far as I know. Um, but here's a guy that it may be that it's going to end up being Arkansas. But either way, that to know that there's multiple names at Arkansas on the international flavor uh, here at this stage, recruiting tells me that they're actively pursuing a depth piece at the 4 spot is what this would be. I think this guy translates as a 4-5, maybe primarily as a backup to Trevor Brazile at the 4, but could help you at the 5 if needed. And so that would give you 4 bigs, 6'10" or taller
Yeah.
as well on your front line in that depth, in that front line depth. But the guy's super athletic, just watching his highlights. A rim hunter, you lost to do Thero. I'm not comparing him to Thero, but in terms of being that, in that 4 rotation, Thero is your primary with Brazile as the backup. That shifts this year. If you get this guy, Brazile is your primary. This guy's the backup. But the comparison to Thero is just that downhill, get to the rim, attack the rim at all
Yeah.
costs, take on challenges at the rim. The guy looks to me, if he's not an elite athlete, he's a plus athlete when you watch his footage. And again, we're not in a position to say this is a private commit that's about to go public. But the staff did intimate to me that something could be announced soon, not relative to this guy, just in general, and that
Hmm.
it could be an international player. Again, I've got sources who think it's this guy going to Arkansas. So we'll see what soon means. We'll see if it's this guy or maybe some of the other names I'd heard that I've been sworn to secrecy not to divulge at this time. And so maybe at some point we will. Maybe it'll be a moot point because it's this guy. But here we go. For those fans, Jacob, that needed another roster piece, this would get you to a 9 guys in your day to day game to game, two deep
Yeah.
rotation with guys like unknown still with a guy like Isaiah Seeley, maybe Kareem Artall as 10 and 11 playable depth if attrition comes or a combination of attrition and illness or some combination of the one of those things and foul trouble in a game where you've got to rely on somebody else that's playable. Outside the top 9 last year, you basically had 5 guys that were effectively walk-ons, just bodies for
Yeah.
practice, locker room stuff, whatever. I think there's more here, and if you add this guy again, it gets you the 9 players, 9-man deep in the 2-man, excuse me, 9 players in the 2 deep rotation with 2 more that can maybe help you as needed. And so you went from 9 playable dudes in a sense to 11, which was a talking point. I think Calipari at one point even said that they may look to do that. Adding one more would sense that, and maybe then you truly are done with this roster.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we've been saying that for a while. I'll ask you the same question I did when we were chatting about Mirnan last week. You talked about their kind of perfect segue into it about it'd be 9 in your 2 deep now. How much if he was the guy that Arkansas gets? Let's just say hypothetically, what type of role do you see him playing? Like you said, on a day-to-day spot, how many minutes roughly? Give me a rough estimate. How much do you think he could contribute given what he brings to the team?
I would say just without digging more into it,
Yeah.
12 to 15
Okay.
minutes. I really want to go through expectations. But Trevor Brazile 2 years ago at Arkansas played his highest minute count per game at like 20 between 25 and 26 minutes. He tends to get in foul trouble. If he's locked
Hmm.
in and playing the way that he was playing at the end of the season, you're still thinking how many of those games, as good as he was, did he sit much of the first half with
Yeah.
2 fouls and then blew up the second half? And it was still, you're looking at 20 to 25 minutes a game just for him at that 4 spot. So where we were thinking Arkansas was going to have to get maybe creative in the minutes that he was helping at the 5, or maybe taking a breather, or maybe he's out extended minutes for foul trouble. This guy be 21 in August, so he's going to turn 21 in
Okay.
August. He's about 220 pounds at 6'10, 6'11, whatever it is. Bouncy as hell. I mean, look, this front line, Malik Ewan had over the transfer from Florida State. He had over 50 dunks last year at Florida
Yeah.
State. We know that Trevor Brazil's a rim eater and an above the rim guy beyond the 7'4 wingspan. Nick Pringle's not afraid to put you in the rim. Billy Richmond III, not afraid off the wing to put you in the rim. Carter Knox,
Yeah.
he learned how to get downhill. He's good in transition. So this is another guy. You talk about actual role and just how do you disperse that and get him on the court. Just my initial take is maybe 12 to 15 minutes per game.
Hmm.
But, eh, playing in the pro league over in Russia, averaging nearly 28 minutes per game on the lower level, on that lower division, the second division, on the upper division, about 8 minutes per game. So split the baby a little bit there, maybe how it would project, because we know he's not being earmarked to come in and start.
Yeah.
Now, he might be good enough that if you need him to do that, again, let's say injury, whatever, God forbid, you don't want to jinx it, but you'd say, okay, maybe we can earmark 12 to 15, but we trust him enough and other things we could do to get more out of him as needed. So
Yeah.
that's how I kind of initially see it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point also about the type of athleticism that Arkansas already has on the front line, but also what he would add potentially. Those guards, they better get comfortable in terms of throwing lobs because it sounds like they've got a whole lot of guys that could finish on that front line.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Options. And, that's the thing when you want a guy like Darius Haycup Jr., who's going to be start games as your primary lead guard. I think we're going to see DJ Wagner in the combo role, start games at the 2. They'll share lead responsibilities. But you want those guys to get better. I think Acuff is a scoring first lead guard,
Yeah.
but he's still a good facilitator.
Mhm.
We know DJ Wagner can be a decent to good facilitator. Those guys, it's going to make it easier for them to get off the ball on their initial move when they get a numbers advantage because they can lob it up. So the more of those guys you have, that means you don't have stretches of games where
Yeah.
if you only had 1 or 2, maybe they're not on the court. You're
Mhm.
always going to have a guy that can attack that rim like that.
Yeah, yeah, an interesting potential addition for the Hogs for sure. We're getting closer, Kevin, to finally finalizing that 25-26 roster. I know you'll keep an eye on it. Before we go, we're going to talk a little bit about the Pro Hogs in the NBA Finals. But first, one more quick break and a message from our sponsors. Back here on the Hog Hoops Report, wrapping up shop. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. And Kevin, we got to talk a little bit about two pro Hogs going for an NBA championship here. Pacers Thunder, a matchup that on paper, I don't think anybody really gave Indiana much of a chance. I know as a Pacers fan, I didn't. The Pacers steal game one, but Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams. I think the Thunder's still in a good spot, but man, it's going to be interesting now to see how this series plays out after just an insane game one.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about it off the air and on the air, and
Yeah.
I went on about Indiana's ball movement
Yeah.
and how they're the guy that's going to get you is often in disguise for the first 40 to 45 minutes because they share the ball so well. And it's not about one guy pounding it and getting to his and making sure he's the best player on the court. And then
Hmm.
everything, the dust settles around that. But at the end of the game, when all the chips are on the line and you got a chance to win or tie with a 2 or a 3, or you want the ball in Halliburton's hands, that's when they have their hero ball. Not until then. And so that always, and they've done it throughout these playoffs. So nobody should be shocked by this. Really, they shouldn't. It's kind of scripted out in every series. Oklahoma City Thunder on a record-setting season, regular season. Some of the stuff they've done in the playoffs. They've bounced back after every playoff loss with a win. So that's all. That little streak's on the line tonight in Oklahoma City. But Indiana, I think, are they still unbeaten on the road to open games in the playoffs? Because they've been
Yes.
I think they've been
They beat
at least in the
Cleveland.
last
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I think they were 2-0 in that, both on the road to start. They were 2-0 against the Knicks. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then they hosted Milwaukee. I think they were up 2-0 as well. Milwaukee won game
Right. So I
3.
think
So,
every
yeah.
series it's been like that, and now they're 1-0. So somebody's streak's got to go.
Yeah.
Either the Pacers undefeated in the first 2 road games before they go home, or Oklahoma City bouncing back because they haven't lost much in the playoffs. They did
Mhm.
lose 3 games and go into 7 against Denver, but every time they lost in in the playoffs, now I guess 4 rounds, they've bounced back with a win. So, we'll see what happens. But I think this series, I'm glad to see that
Yeah.
it's got a chance to go 6 or 7. When a lot of the projections were a sweep or a gentleman's sweep and being over sooner rather than later, I think this is a good thing for the finals. And what an exciting game that was.
Yeah, that was just we were talking a little bit before we hopped on here. Just if you watched it 48 minutes, it's one of those things where you just found yourself saying, "How on earth did Indiana win that basketball game?" They didn't lead once until Halliburton put them up 111-110 with
That's right.
point 0.3 seconds left or whatever it might have been. Indiana turned the ball over 19 times in the first half.
Yeah.
Oklahoma City is a team that just feasts on turnovers and turns them into points. And for some reason, they couldn't do that. And I think
Yeah.
you make a great point about just the balance of the Indiana team from the standpoint that Halliburton was really a no-show offensively in the fourth quarter. He wasn't a part of the offense at all for the final 6 minutes, and then he just said, "Give me the ball, I'm going to go win the game." In terms of the last shot, no guys over 20 points. They had 6 different guys in double figures. It is not the type of NBA approach you're used to seeing for a team that's in the finals and really has a chance to win it too.
Yeah, see, there are different things. So you made a great point about the first half turnovers. Thunder led only 12 at halftime after
Yeah.
forcing 19 turnovers on their home court. The second half, Indiana did a better job with it. But I disagree about Halliburton. This is what I think people miss.
Okay.
You see the guy that you're wanting to call a superstar or be that guy. And I've heard discussion, should Halliburton focus more on his scoring or as a facilitator? And that's the beauty of him
Yeah.
is that he doesn't have to be painted. Go-to guy doesn't have to score
Mm-mm.
30 every time, and he's always going to get it. Too many times we expect that guy to be the one that's take the balls in his hands all the time, or especially in the last 3 or 4 minutes. I thought Halliburton played a brilliant offensive game. People can laugh at that throughout because I kept noticing that he wasn't trying to force things. He was getting
Yeah.
off of it. Why? Because he trusts his teammates, and they got a ton of guys that can shoot. They got 5 or 6 guys that can knock down threes and
Hmm.
multiple threes in volume and relative efficiency. And if you're a good player or a great player and understand that, it doesn't have to be all about you and your stats. So I think he played the right way. Now, he had turnovers like the rest of them did in those 19 first half. Nobody looked good, and Oklahoma City can do that to you. But I think the truth is 2 things. I thought Oklahoma City, by changing their starting lineup and taking
Yeah.
out one of the 2 bigs and putting Cason Wallace in as good as he is, I think you you basically showed your hand that matchup is not you're not comfortable who you are with that matchup. And I thought Oklahoma City made a huge mistake. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was at the free throw line with about 3 minutes left. They were up 6. He had 2 free throws. He made the first one, and then that's when they do the sub in, sub out. And Wallace came in for Chet Holmgren,
Yeah.
and they didn't have any bigs on the court for 3 plus minutes. And Shea makes the next free throw. They're up 8. There's 3 plus minutes. And I didn't wait till later to say this. I told my son we were watching the game. I looked to him and I said, that's a mistake this early.
Yes.
I think what they're trying to do is protect that lead and have guys that are switchable and can close out quickly on shooters. They're trying to prevent from just getting some of those 3-point shots, but it made them really vulnerable on the glass. And you saw the Pacers. Uh, Siakam got a couple of big offensive rebounds in that stretch where they overcame that deficit. And in total, they overcame a 15-point deficit. But in that stretch, it was 8. But they got a couple of one put back, some free throws off offensive rebounds. And then on the other end, when Oklahoma City missed, they just didn't have a big body in there for a chance at a tip in or an offensive rebound. So I thought that was a mistake. It's a coaching decision. If it had played out and worked, it's brilliant, right? So who am I to but I was thinking that at the time. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong about that. But that was my take on it. I think the other thing is, as much has been made of Oklahoma City's defense, and it's
Hmm.
justified. To me, the end of this game was about who had better offense, uh,
Yeah.
plain and simple. And so I think Indiana, as good as they've been since they got over their injury problems, what was it, December,
Yep.
that deep, and I think them and Oklahoma City since that point have been the two winningest teams to where we are now. I think they're the best offense. I don't care what the what the advanced stats say, or what some of them are good for Indiana, but to me, I think they've got the best offense at the end of games because they don't rely on one or two guys. It can be anybody gets you, and then at the end, good luck
Mm.
stopping Halliburton. Because here's what would have happened at the end of that game. I heard people say, "Why didn't they immediately trap him in the backcourt when he circled back for the ball with 8 seconds left?" If you do that, he's going
Yep.
to make a great pass to the guy that now they've got a numbers advantage and there's enough time to maybe get a layup or get fouled or get an open look. So you'd say, well, knowing this now about Halliburton, I'd rather do that than even chance him. That's a valid point, but I mean, you pick your poison because this guy makes the right play. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I think it gets undersold when you look at his stats and go, how can he be a superstar? I mean, the dude's incredible, man.
Yeah, yeah, he was impressive again, and just the offensive versatility to say, all right, Andrew Nemhard's going to handle the ball for the final 6 minutes of the game, and Halliburton's going to play off ball, just wildly impressive. And I agree with you on the standpoint of switching the lineup. You're a 68-14 team. You've been the most dominant team throughout the entire season. I don't think you need to do that. And when you look at Arkansas, gosh, when you look at the Pacers, a team that struggled on the glass and really has one viable center because of 2 Achilles injuries and Miles Turner, and they out rebound you 56-39. That is not a viable recipe for the Thunder. I think we'll see a switch in that tonight. But that's all the time we have on this week's Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. We'll be back to talk to you next week.